Hey everybody, this is Aaron Kasinitz, PennLive.com's Philadelphia Eagles beat reporter, here with my colleague Daniel Gallen, and we're going to talk about, what to expect now that the NFL free agency tampering period has begun. Teams can start contacting agents of players, and today is really the day where the ball gets rolling in terms of free agency.
Yeah, it's kind of funny because legal tampering is just kind of an oxymoron.
Right.
With kind of the wording of it and stuff. But basically what it means is that I guess teams can now start talking for real about what they want to do, what's going to happen. So, I mean, then it seems like based on the past couple of weeks, there's going to be a lot that's going to happen.
Yeah, no doubt. So if you guys have been paying attention to Eagles news lately, you know that just because it hasn't been free agency, just because the new year hasn't started, it doesn't mean they've been quiet. They traded, last week there were reports that they agreed to trade for Michael Bennett, the three-time Pro Bowl defensive end with the Seahawks. Fast forward to Friday, more reports. They swapped wide receiver Torrey Smith for Darryl Worley of the Carolina Panthers, adding another cornerback into the secondary. So, what we got at this point right now is the Eagles have made some trades, but they're still significantly over the cap. About $10 million over the cap, so they're going to need to make cuts before Wednesday at 4 p.m. And they've got some holes. They're the Super Bowl champions. They don't necessarily have holes to fill on the roster so much as they have areas that they could address, places where they could pad depth, places where maybe they could swap out a veteran player for a younger player.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the one really interesting thing, I guess, to watch today was this morning there were reports that the Eagles are trying to bring Patrick Robinson back, which, isn't a surprise based on his performance last year, but when you look at kind of the mechanics of the salary cap and kind of the fact that they are so cash strapped and everything, it is kind of surprising, and I think it just kind of signals that there's going to be so many more moves happening.
Yeah, no doubt. And I think with Patrick Robinson specifically, it's interesting because he's going to turn 31 in September, so he's not a guy who's going to sign this big, lucrative, long-term contract. But he is a guy that if you're a contending team like the Eagles, he fills a very specific role because he's an inside cornerback. He does a great job at covering opposing slot receivers. So if you're looking for that guy, he can help you win a championship this year, next year, maybe the year after that. So what you would look for with Patrick Robinson is a relatively cheap deal because he plays this one specific role and he's a little bit older, but nothing more than 3 years. And so he's the perfect guy that the Eagles will look for. A guy like Nigel Bradham, who I believe he's 28, he was the leading tackler. He played every type of role that you could as a linebacker. He's a guy who's going to command more money because he does more, he's younger. That's why maybe you'll see Patrick Robinson come back, where a guy like Nigel Bradham, who's another really important part to the defense, won't come back. Not saying, it's certainly possible Bradham will come back, but it looks unlikely at this point because other teams will be willing to pay more for a younger guy, linebacker, who do more. Those are things to keep in mind as we go through this offseason. The Eagles just don't have the money to bring back these stalwarts. What they have is a core that's already established, guys like Zach Ertz, Fletcher Cox, Malcolm Jenkins, and then they want to pick those role players around. Patrick Robinson, perfect example of a role player who they might be able to retain, who is very valuable but not too expensive.
So when free agents kind of starts, so by the end of free agency and everything, what do you think the Eagles will have accomplished? What are some of the things that you think they'll kind of kick forward down to address in the draft?
Yeah, I think it's one of those deals where maybe I don't necessarily think they have a checklist that we want this done in free agency, we want this done in the draft. I think they'll look at everything in free agency. I think a few things that make sense for them to address in free agency. They got some help on the defensive line. They got some help in the secondary with Worley. So the first thing to address is getting under the salary cap. The second thing to address, I think, would be the linebackers. I think that's the one obvious need that they have. And linebackers is the one spot where you would say they could go sign somebody and then still draft somebody. They have a lack of depth there. And when you look at their three starting linebackers from last year, all three have major issues. I wouldn't say major issues, maybe so much as just question marks moving forward. You got Jordan Hicks. He's played 3 years in the NFL and he's been really good. But he's had season-ending injuries in 2 of those 3 years. Can you really count on him down the road? You got Michael Kendricks, who the Eagles, even when Jordan Hicks was hurt, he took on a bigger role, but they still like to move Malcolm Jenkins up. They didn't like to leave Kendricks in there the way they did with Bradham and Hicks. Kendricks also requested a trade last year. He just doesn't seem like he's the perfect fit in this Jim Schwartz scheme. And then you have Bradham, who's a free agent who might be priced out of the Eagles. So you're really left with no stable long-term options at linebacker. So if the Eagles do spend a little bit of money and they can't bring Bradham back, I think what we see is maybe the next tier linebacker who's worth maybe $1 or $2 million per year less than Bradham. If they can go get that guy, maybe he's out there on the open market, maybe not. I think that's the number one thing is, can they address the linebacker situation? Because if not, if they lose Bradham, are you really content going into the season with Jordan Hicks and Michael Kendricks being your two best linebackers, considering one isn't a great fit and one keeps getting hurt?
Mm-hmm. And there was plenty with kind of the guys behind there that we kind of saw when Hicks went out. I think Kendricks had a couple injuries.
Right, Kendricks has been battling quad injury really for the last 3 years.
And so when you saw when those guys were out and you kind of saw what they were putting in there, it didn't really inspire the most confidence.
Right, like Joe Walker was a guy who ended up getting a ton of playing time, but he's a 7th round pick in 2006, and Joe Walker was a good fill-in role player. He wasn't good enough to be really on the field all that much, and they ended up pushing him to IR late in the season, even though he wasn't that hurt, because he really just wasn't all that valuable. Najee Good is another guy. He's a special teams guy who could fill in at linebacker, but and we saw this in I believe it was the Vikings, the NFC Championship game. Mm-hmm. The Eagles' biggest deficiency, I think, Najee Good was on the field, and when the Vikings threw an early touchdown pass, that was over Najee Good. Well, they adjusted so that they didn't have 3 linebackers on the field, and they ended up blowing out the Vikings. But if there is a deficiency as linebacker, because Najee Good, Joe Walker, last year they brought Donnell Ellerbe in, but he's an older guy. He could have been nearing retirement. These aren't guys you want to be relying on. The Eagles need at least one linebacker they can rely on.
So we've got 2 of our comments are about Nick Foles. I mean, that's obviously, I think, what a lot of people want to know. And something that could wind up being pretty important next year for the Eagles. What do you kind of see, happening with that?
Yeah, so Nick Foles is due a roster bonus on March 18th. They have a $3 million roster bonus. That's not to say that they will definitely trade him by then. That the salary cap issue, they can figure that out. I think with Foles, they would save money if they trade him, a lot of money on the salary cap. So I think those are some things to think about. But I think with Nick Foles, they're going to hold on to him, at least for now, because I think what's going to happen is a market could materialize if there's a ton of quarterback-needy teams this year. There's also a ton of available quarterbacks. Case Keenum's out there. We know about Kirk Cousins. I think what we'll see the Eagles do is wait. If one team is willing to way overpay for Nick Foles because they missed out on the guy that wanted in the free agency market, or maybe they wait until training camp and somebody gets hurt, that's the only way the Eagles are going to get a ton of value for Nick Foles. And if you're not going to get a ton of value for him, why trade him? I think that's the way they're viewing it now. But you never know. I mean, the Eagles, if there's one team in the NFL that is prone to surprising you, the Eagles are certainly up there. They could keep Nick Foles. They could trade him. We don't know at this point. The Eagles they haven't shut down the possibility. The Eagles have been open and said, look, we're going to do whatever it takes to make the team better, but we like having good players. Nick Foles, Super Bowl MVP, he's a good player. That's been their stance, leaving the door open, but just a little crack.
Yeah, I mean, the quarterback market, it's not really a seller's market. It's definitely a lot more of a buyer's market where, there's so many quarterbacks available in free agency, and then there's a ton in the draft, too. I think when we did our mock draft, we had 4 going in the top 6. And so with that, and with kind of looking at kind of like what the Bills got for Tyrod Taylor, which it's a different situation because that's someone that I think as we saw last year, that they're kind of actively trying to, move on from. And, they didn't really get that much in return from the Browns, a couple mid-round picks.
Right. So, I don't think the Eagles would trade Nick Foles for a 3rd-round pick.
Yeah.
I think that's the Eagles, in that case, would keep him. With the Bills, it was they were going to trade Tyrod Taylor for whatever they could get for him. Yep. It ended up being a 3rd-round pick. I think the Eagles are very open to keeping Nick Foles. I think there are certain people out there who think they're just going to wait and find the right spot and trade him. I think they're serious about keeping him if the market doesn't materialize. If they can get a 1st-round pick or something like that for him, then they'll have to consider it.
Yeah, and then obviously it kind of goes without saying that Carson Wentz's recovery, rehab, whatever they're seeing from him, also kind of has a bit of an impact on
It's such an underlying factor. It's not like Carson Wentz missed the Super Bowl with an injury that kept him out for a game or 2. This is a serious injury. Carson Wentz's goal is to be back week 1, but he's not putting a specific timetable on it. If you're a Super Bowl contending team and you're going to go 2, 3, 4 weeks without a starting quarterback, you want that backup to be really good. So you're right. There's definitely reasons that make this situation unique, and I think the Nick Foles situation is not going to go away. It's going to hover over the team all offseason, but I think they'll be fine handling it. And my guess would be when the team reports back, I think it's the third week in April, they can start off-season workouts. My guess is Nick Foles will be there with the team, and he'll be, at that point, the starting quarterback, because Carson Wentz will still be rehabbing.
There's also, just kind of off the top of my head, there's kind of a weird kind of dynamic with the early season part too, where, if you know that Wentz is going to miss like the first 4 weeks of the season or something, because the Eagles won the Super Bowl, they're going to open with a marquee Thursday night game, which means that their schedule might be a little bit more front-loaded than it has been in the past, which, when you kind of, think about it from that, you'd probably rather have Foles than Nate Sudfeld, if you have to play, like, if they have to play like, the Vikings on Thursday night.
Right. And no, I don't like, the Eagles blew out the Vikings with Nick Foles. The Eagles play the Vikings with Nate Sudfeld in primetime. I don't even know if they're favorites.
Yeah. So
that's definitely something to keep in mind. And Ruth Ann, one of our commenters, says he plays his best football with the Eagles. You need to keep Foles. That's something to keep in mind too, where other teams might look at it and say Nick Foles has only done well in these certain circumstances, and he's more valuable to the Eagles than a certain team. And the Eagles might feel that way. And if I were the Eagles, that's something I would have to take into account, is he's played well under our coaches and our system and our stadium. So we might think he's worth a first-round pick. No other team might, so why not just keep him?
Yeah.
That's another thought. Again, the Eagles, they've proven that they're going to keep their options open. They're going to consider everything. But there are lots of reasons, at least at this point, to keep him tucked away and not being a rush, at least, to trade him.
So what's one position that you could see them addressing in free agency that's not necessarily one of, I guess, kind of the glaring ones, like linebacker?
Yeah. Right. I think we've talked about this, and I guess you could consider this a glaring need in terms of depth, but a tight end, I think, is the number. If you're looking at linebacker and then tight end, which is a little strange because their base offense only had one tight end on the field, and he's a Pro Bowler, Zach Ertz. But I think the way the Eagles run their offense, they look for mismatches. They do as much as any team in the NFL, they mix and match skill players. So you'll see 3 wide receivers, 1 tight end, 1 running back on the field. One play. The next play, you'll see 3 tight ends, 1 receiver, 1 running back, and it'll be a different receiver and a different running back. They like to do that sort of thing, and if they want to have the flexibility to continue to do that, they need a guy behind Zach Ertz. That guy the last couple of years has been Trey Burton. Brent Selleck, great blocker, can run a route, play action, stuff like that, but a really good route-running, pass-catching tight end at the top of his game. Trey Burton has been that guy behind Zach Ertz. He's been good when filling in for Ertz, when Ertz has been hurt, and he's been really good situationally. He had 5 touchdown catches last year. That would have led the team a year ago. I think that's something that people don't understand. Trey Burton would have led the team. His 5 touchdowns would have led the team 5 touchdown receptions in 2016.
Yeah.
That's obviously the team got much better in 2017. They scored more, but he's a weapon in the red zone. He's a weapon on third downs, and he's a guy who just gives you flexibility. If a team goes and pays Trey Burton to be a legit starter, the Eagles will need to find a guy, whether it's a tight end, whether it's like a fullback hybrid. They just need somebody else who gives them that versatility. And I personally think that they'll do that either early in the draft or with maybe a cheap free agent. So we'll see.
Any names that pop out to you?
I think when we were looking in terms of free agency, obviously with the draft, there's plenty of interesting names. But when we're looking free agency, Austin Seferian-Jenkins, guy's going with the Jets, a very talented guy. He's had some issues in the past, but the Eagles have shown that they're willing to take risks on guys, and he's a talented guy. Niles Paul, the guy you and I have talked about, who he went to Nebraska. He's been a team captain on special teams for the Redskins. He would fill the Trey Burton really good special teams role, but he was a wide receiver at Nebraska, so he's got some route running skills. He hasn't been a superstar for the Redskins. He's a little older, so that's what might make him cheaper. But still a guy who's a good route runner, good special teams player. So those are the guys I would watch. And then the draft, Mike Gesicki is kind of the one who stood out the combine. But there's a couple other tight ends you could see the Eagles, either with that late first-round pick, if they trade back, if they get a second or third-round pick, they can target for sure.
Ruth Ann wants to know if Mac Hollins will start this year. That's kind of with the Torrey Smith trade. That's kind of been a pretty big assumption. Where do you kind of think about that?
Yeah, I think if you're projecting the Eagles lineup right now, Mac Hollins is going to start at that receiver position opposite of Alshon Jeffrey. So it'd be Alshon Jeffrey on one side, Matt Collins on the other, Nelson Aguilar on the slot. That's kind of how it would be right now. But the Eagles have shown that they're willing to stockpile talent, right? Last year, they didn't just go out and get Alshon Jeffrey. They went out and got Alshon Jeffrey and Torrey Smith. They didn't just, stay content with their defensive line. They went out and got Michael Bennett, and now they have 4 defensive ends who are probably our starting caliber. So I would say Matt Collins starts. That's the guess. But you can't assume the Eagles won't add somebody who will create competition for Matt Collins. But Matt Collins, strong rookie year. He had that long touchdown catch, I believe, against the Redskins on Monday night. Was he perfect? Did he play enough to prove that he's going to be a star caliber player? No, but he displayed the flashes that you want to see out of a rookie. And clearly, the Eagles felt comfortable trading Torrey Smith, in part because they thought he was the type of guy who can contribute more and more in his second year.
Yeah, I think. And they also hired his college wide receivers coach, Gunter Brewer. Right. I think with Hollins, I think that he's a guy that, as we saw last year, he played a lot more snaps as the year went on, and he was very efficient in those snaps he played.
Yeah.
I think there's that insane first down catch set that he had. Yeah. But I mean, it's a thing where I wouldn't be surprised if he was still the number 4 receiver going into next year. Whether when training camp starts, whether that's because they use a higher pick in the draft, or whether or not they grab someone in free agency.
Right. And keep in mind with the Eagles, when we're talking about this when camp starts and stuff, Alshon Jeffrey's torn rotator cuff surgery. Yes. We'll probably keep him out at least through training camp, maybe into the preseason, maybe through the preseason. Mm-hmm. So we could have a situation where the Eagles want to stockpile receivers, but Matt Collins still has every opportunity in the world to earn his position because the Eagles they traded Torrey Smith. They're dealing with the injury to Alshon Jeffrey, and they don't have the money to spend on another Alshon Jeffrey. If they bring a guy in, it won't be a 5-time Pro Bowler. It'll be a talented player. So I agree with you on that, and I think something to watch is how the wide receiver position plays out while Alshon Jeffrey recovers.
Yeah, he'll definitely get his chance. See, Chad wants to know about Shaquem Griffin. I think that's kind of an interesting mid-round pick when you talk about a linebacker, someone that's versatile, someone that can help on special teams. I think that he's someone to kind of watch within that 4th round range. Everything. And
I think, we've seen some analysts talk about the fact that he does have one hand, and that, how do you judge that? It's really hard to take that into account because he ran the fastest 40-yard dash of a linebacker in however many years. His bench press was impressive. He was a 2-time All-Conference player, 1-time Conference Defense Player of the Year in Conference USC.
Just the AAC.
Conference, American. Yes, AAC. Sorry about that. This is a brand new conference. But
alignment's confusing.
Right, exactly. And UCF, UCF not only won that conference, they went undefeated. So he was the best player on that team, I think, arguably. Mm-hmm. So he's a legitimate prospect. I think what he needs is a team to just take a chance on him. And I think he's done enough to earn that chance, like you said, in the 3rd or 4th round. And if the Eagles are a linebacker needy team, he's a speedy coverage linebacker. He seems to fit perfectly. Mm-hmm. That said, when you're talking about mid-round picks, how many trades will the Eagles make? Will he be available? We don't know, but he seems to be an ideal target, absolutely.
Yeah, and definitely, too, with the Eagles overall as an organization, they seem like something where I think this kind of goes from Doug Peterson down, where it's kind of like, all right, we have our system and everything, but we'll see which players we have. Right. Then we'll make things work.
Exactly. No, and I think that's sort of Doug Peterson, and that's kind of the way it works, is where they do that collaboration. Mm-hmm. Whereas Peterson coaches the guys. In that case, Jim Schwartz would take the defense. Ken Fajoli would be the linebackers coach. They would take them. We'll figure it out. Howie Roseman and Joe Douglas, those guys, figure out who's worth it. The Eagles have thought outside the box before. It would not be a surprise if they draft somebody like Shaquem Griffin or take a chance on another guy like that. So I'm really curious to see how all that stuff plays out, particularly with him because of the situation. But he's a very good player. If I were the Eagles, he would certainly be one of the players I would want to learn more about and consider drafting.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that just about does it for us. Thanks everyone for watching. We'll be back tomorrow to talk about what to expect when the league year starts, like at high noon on Wednesday. And as the Eagles make a flurry of moves, which I think we're both expecting, we'll be back with some breaking analysis and all that stuff.
Yep. Follow us PennLive.com/Philadelphia Eagles, where you can see the coverage, our Twitter account. On this Facebook page, we'll try and keep you guys updated because a lot is going to happen over the next 3, 4, or 5 days. All right, we'll see you guys next time, and enjoy free agency period. It should be fun.